Hey guys, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment. It's easy for you, but it means a lot to me. Let's get started. Imagine an evening. An old house with high ceilings, creaking floorboards, and a silence so deep it almost seems to be listening. Outside, dusk is settling in, shadows thickening. Inside, a dim, cozy light. And what seems to be just an ordinary children's game. But sometimes it's those innocent little games that open doors best left closed. During quarantine, Sarah often played hide-and-seek with her 4-year-old daughter, Emily. It was more than just entertainment. It was an escape from monotony and loneliness. They had their own rules. First, only Sarah hid. Emily didn't like hiding. Second, Sarah would call out peekaboo from time to time so Emily wouldn't get bored. Third, if Emily got close, Sarah had to stick out a hand or a foot, a little clue to keep the game fun. Fourth, Emily would always shriek with delight, "I see your feet!" Her laughter echoed through the old walls. The house they had recently moved into was full of peculiar details. High ceilings, wide hallways, and floorboards that groaned underfoot. The air itself seemed to remember footsteps that weren't theirs. Sarah tried not to pay attention. She told herself it was just the quirks of an old house. But some things defied logic. One evening, as twilight flooded the room with darkening shadows, Emily tugged at her mother's hand. "Mommy, let's play again. Please." Her eyes sparkled in the dim light. Sarah sighed, smiling wearily. "All right, but just once, okay? Then it's bedtime." Emily ran off to the kitchen, counting loudly. 1, 2, 3. Sarah glanced around. In the corner of the hallway stood an old wardrobe, left behind by the previous owners. It looked as if it had been waiting for this moment. Odd. Why hadn't she noticed how out of place it seemed before? The door creaked as she opened it and climbed inside. It was cramped and dark. The scent of old coats, mothballs, dust, and something else. Something metallic, like an old key forgotten in a drawer. She settled in, pressing against the wooden panel, holding her breath for a moment. Why does it feel like someone is watching me, even when I know I'm alone? To distract herself, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through the news. The silence around her was almost comforting. Almost. Soft footsteps. Emily. Sarah smiled and whispered, "Peekaboo." A giggle. The little footsteps came closer. But then, they didn't stop at the wardrobe. They went upstairs. Sarah frowned. Why is she going up there? She cracked the door open just enough to see tiny feet disappearing up the staircase. Maybe she changed the rules, Sarah thought, looking back at her phone. And then, "Peekaboo." A voice, soft, clear. But it wasn't Emily's. It came from upstairs. Sarah froze. Her heart stopped, a chill racing down her spine. "Emily?" Her voice trembled. Sarah burst out of the wardrobe, her heart hammering. A giggle. But it wasn't right. It was warped, muffled, like an echo. "I see your feet." Sarah's blood ran cold. The voice was wrong. She bolted toward the stairs. "Emily? Sweetheart? Where are you?" Her own voice bounced off the walls, swallowed by the silence that suddenly felt alive. No answer. Just the heavy stillness of something waiting. Have you ever heard silence become louder than your own voice? That's exactly how Sarah felt in that moment. And that's when she knew. This game had stopped being a game a long time ago. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Emily?" Silence. The upstairs hallway was dark. The light flickered, casting distorted shadows that moved as if they had a life of their own. Sarah rushed to Emily's bedroom. Empty. The bed covers tossed aside. Stuffed animals scattered across the floor as if she had left in a hurry. "Sweetheart? Come out. This isn't funny." Her voice wavered. A faint rustling noise from the corner of the room. Sarah lunged forward, but there was nothing. Just Emily's teddy bear lying face down. Then, breathing. Not hers. Shaky. Uneven. "Mommy?" A whisper. Sarah spun around. The bathroom door was slightly open. A single, wide, terrified blue eye peeked out from the gap. "Emily." Sarah rushed forward, yanking the door open, scooping her daughter into her arms. "Where were you? Are you okay?" Emily trembled, clutching her mother's neck. But her eyes weren't on Sarah, they were staring past her. "Mommy, it's there," she whispered. Sarah turned and saw them. Between the hanging dresses in her wardrobe. 2 feet, gray, swollen, with blackened, curling nails. Sarah's body locked up in terror. Every instinct screamed run. She clutched Emily tighter and sprinted for the door. They ran barefoot into the cold night, down the empty street. Behind them, in the darkened house, something was watching. The police searched the house. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No evidence of anyone being there. Even the wardrobe was empty. But Sarah knew. She had seen it, and she would never forget those feet. After that night, Sarah and Emily moved in with a friend. But even far from that house, Sarah couldn't escape the memories. She woke up from nightmares. She saw the wardrobe door creak open on its own. She felt unseen eyes watching from the darkness. And one day, when she returned to gather the last of their things, she heard a whisper. "Peekaboo." Sarah spun around, but there was no one there. She never set foot in that house again. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when everything is quiet, she still hears it. Peekaboo. There was an old couple who lived next door to me. Sometimes I would drop by to visit them and chat over a cup of tea, or ask them if they needed something from the local shops. They treated me like a granddaughter. One day, over tea, I asked the old woman why she never had children of her own. She went pale in the face, and after a while, she told me this terrible and unbelievable story. She said that shortly after they got married, the husband inherited an old house from his grandmother. It was located on the outskirts of the city. The grandmother had spent the last years of her life in a psychiatric hospital. Nobody knew exactly what happened to her. All that was known was that her hair had turned gray overnight and she went insane. Her house had been empty for many years. Nobody ever knew about the hidden evil that lurked within. The young couple began to renovate the house, but things started going wrong from the start. Whenever they tried to do repairs, it seemed that they were taking one step forward and 2 steps back. They put up new wallpaper, but almost immediately it was covered in damp and mold. They put in a new floor, but within days, the floorboards were soggy and rotting. The couple's health also began to decline. The husband had always been a strong and healthy young man, but he suddenly began to suffer from headaches at night. The wife discovered she was pregnant, but it wasn't long before she lost the baby. Because of all this bad luck, their parents suggested they should invite a priest to bless the home, which was the tradition at the time. This was the moment when the nightmare began. As soon as the priest arrived, the couple heard a loud ringing in their ears. They felt as if their heads would split apart. Throughout the whole house, there permeated a disgusting smell. It was an unbearable stench that seemed to come from the pits of hell. Suddenly, a powerful breeze blew through the house and the front window fell out of its frame. The glass fell on the priest and injured him, opening a deep gash in his head. The priest was so scared, he ran out into the street and was hit by a car. The young couple stayed with him and waited for the ambulance to arrive. As they were taking him away, the priest advised the couple to leave the house immediately. He said there was something evil in the house, and he promised that he would consult with his superiors in the church and find a way to help them. The couple weren't able to move out of the house. They couldn't afford to rent another place, and their parents lived in small apartments and had no room to take them in. They couldn't even sell the house because it had a bad reputation. Without understanding what was going on, the man with the woman were forced to go back to the house, which suddenly seemed very quiet, and begin to clean up after the unexplained events. The woman had a strange sensation of an unearthly presence in the house. She said that it was unusually quiet, like the calm before the storm. One day they got a call from the priest who had tried to bless the house. He asked if he could bring 2 other priests with him and carry out a ritual to rid the house of evil. Of course, the young couple agreed. The man and woman met the 3 priests in a nearby park and handed over the keys of the house. They waited in the park for the ritual to be finished. 3 hours later, the priests returned and told them that the house was now in order. The priests said they were surprised because while they performed the ritual, the evil in the house never showed itself once. After that, events began to develop at a frightening pace. One night, the wife had a terrible dream in which she saw thick black cobwebs all over the house and heard a blood-curdling voice scream, "Get out! Get out!" The next morning, her husband was walking down the stairs when a chandelier that hung in the hall fell on him and broke his leg. While they were at the hospital, their oven somehow caused a fire and the entire kitchen burned down. Every day, something strange and terrible would happen that defied explanation. The last straw came when the young wife was at the top of the stairs, and she felt something strong push her down the stairs. When she was in the hospital, the doctors said that due to her injuries, she would never be able to have children. The couple left the evil old house and rented a small, cheap attic room in a building on the other side of the city. This quiet little closet seemed like paradise to them compared to their house of evil. A few months later, the man found out that all 3 priests who had performed the ritual in the old house were dead. They had been overseeing some renovations on their church, and a heavy crucifix had fallen off the wall and crushed them. The wife was horrified by the news and decided to dig through the archives and find out about the history of the house. She discovered that it had once been owned by a rich man with a terrible legacy. He had devoted his life to evil. He was a Satanist, and police suspected that he performed satanic rituals in the house that involved blood sacrifice and murder. A number of children in the area had gone missing. When the police knocked on his door, the rich man locked himself in his office and shot himself in the head. He was buried outside the cemetery and without a funeral service. It was after that terrible incident that the strange and terrible things began to occur in the house. All of the subsequent tenants who stayed in the house would not live in it for very long. They were constantly changing and running away. When the husband's grandmother came to live in the house, she was a young and beautiful woman. She married several times, but every one of her husbands died in the house under mysterious circumstances. By the time she was an old woman, she hoped that all the troubles associated with the house were over, but something terrible and incomprehensible must have happened there one night that drove her out of her mind. When the sinister building was demolished, many people saw a strange black cloud rising into the sky. All of the birds in the trees seemed to flee from it. When she finished her story, the old woman said that today, the place is now a road, and at the exact spot where the House of Evil once stood, there are often fatal car accidents.